please welcome Her Majesty's Consul General, Tim Flear.
Thank you, and good morning to everyone. I want to start by saying it's a tremendous honour and privilege to be here today, to be given this opportunity to speak to you all. And I think as well it's particularly fitting that today's event follows yesterday's International Women's Day, and there's obviously a kind of strong connection between the themes there. So I'd like to say particularly to our women attendees today, be bold for change. And another point that I want to address up front is that I'm speaking to you today as a gay man. And I'm also speaking to you today as a proud advocate of women's rights. So both those factors are very important to me, and I hope in the comments that I want to make you will see how those issues are illustrated in my life, and on a personal level, but also as a UK diplomat. I think the key point that I would like to make to begin with is that diversity makes business sense. Diversity makes business sense. Christine Lagarde, the managing director of the International Monetary Fund, noted a few years ago that if Lehman Brothers had been Lehman sisters, the economic crisis clearly wouldn't have looked quite different. And while that comment may have been intended as a joke, there's growing evidence of a link between diversity at senior levels of an organization and how an organization performs and behaves. A report from McKinsey in January 2015 entitled "Why Diversity Matters" makes the case for diversity by showing a strong correlation between the level of diversity at senior levels and company profits. They found a clear link between company performance and both gender and ethnic diversity in leadership positions. Companies with gender diverse leadership were 15% more likely to make profits above the national industry average, while companies with significant ethnic diversity in leadership were 35% more likely to make higher profits. Interestingly, the McKinsey report also concluded that companies start doing better once women constitute 22% of the executive team. The upper reaches of many UK and I suspect Italian private and public sector organisations consist of male senior managers with similar backgrounds, education and cultural references. And it's easy to see how this homogeneity leads to groupthink, which in turn means that bad proposals are agreed without challenge. But tackling diversity is, of course, not just about gender. McKinsey also suggested that other kinds of diversity, for example, in age, sexual orientation, and experience, such as global mindset and cultural fluency, are also likely to bring some level of competitive advantage. In Italy, for companies that can attract and retain such diverse talent. Now, this is where I numbered my speech wrongly, but let me just go back anyway. Where am I now? Yes, so the arguments for promoting diversity are compelling. When companies and organizations commit themselves to diverse leadership, they are more successful. And gender equality is, of course, one of today's themes. It's a key area of UK foreign policy and core to the work of British diplomats. The equal rights of women are enshrined in international law, yet no country in the world has achieved gender equality. No country. In no society in the world are women and girls truly equal. Indeed, the so-called gender gap is predicted to last until the year 2186. And in Italy, for example, I believe that around 46% of women are in the workforce, whereas the European average is some 58%. And in the UK, and the UK is equally culprit in certain respects, women on average are still paid some 10% less than their male peers. I would say that this is a gross breach of women's fundamental human rights and morally wrong. And one of the most severe manifestations of gender inequality is violence against women and girls, and the statistics are shocking. Globally, 1 in 3 women is beaten or sexually abused in her lifetime, and it's the most pervasive of human rights abuses. The simple fact is that we know that, as well, gender inequality obstructs the achievement of a more secure and prosperous world. Empowering women and girls around the world improves peace and stability, and also improves good governance, spurs poverty reduction, and, relevant to this business-related forum, enhances economic growth. And coincidentally, at an event to mark International Women's Day on the 8th of March, the British Foreign Secretary, Boris Johnson, set out his commitment to breaking down the barriers that hold women and girls back, and appointed the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, this is my ministry, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, first ever special envoy for gender equality. And the Foreign Office, my employer, has come some way as an organisation. Up to the 1970s, women diplomats were forced to resign if they married. And it was in 1976 that the Foreign Office appointed its first female ambassador, 1976. But a little over 40 years later, there are now more than 50 female heads of mission around the world, from Australia to Zimbabwe, and of course in Rome, where my colleague Jill Morris has just become the first British female ambassador to Italy. And the UK is already working hard on this issue of gender inequality, and I think we're making a difference. British ministers and officials at our embassies and high commissions all around the world are taking action to address abuse and violation of women's rights, to promote gender equality, and to empower all women and girls. We're engaging in discussions with policymakers and influencers locally to challenge laws and practices that conspire to hold women back and that serve to sustain high levels of violence against women and girls. And UK diplomats are also working tirelessly at the EU, UN, OSCE, the Council of Europe and elsewhere to support and strengthen the international framework that serves to promote and protect women's rights. As the Foreign Secretary has stated, addressing gender inequality is not, in quotes, nice to have. It's not an add-on to our core British diplomatic work. It is firmly in the UK national interest, and so central to good policy and programming, and integral to the work of all British diplomats. And seeing so many men here today, let me say it's important that we do not forget the key role that men and boys play as agents of change and as beneficiaries of work to promote gender equality. But also, let's be clear, there are no short-term fixes to gender inequality. It's built into the very fabric of all our societies, and work that tackles the social norms and the behaviours that govern relationships between women and men takes time. So our actions are just one step in a journey. I also wish to talk about LGBT rights. And let me start by saying discrimination is multifaceted. It affects almost everyone in one way or another, and I strongly believe that where we see others under attack, we need to speak up and act, not just because it's the right thing to do, but because where an environment of intolerance prevails, we are all harmed by it, both individually and collectively. And despite positive developments in many parts of the world, the overall global picture for LGBT rights remains fragile. The UK is seen as a natural champion of LGBT rights around the world, thanks to our strong international record on the issue in recent years. Governments, international organisations and civil society groups seek our advice. And the UK government is working on two particular priority concerns. One is tackling the continued criminalisation of consensual same-sex relations. And this is not only an affront to individual freedom, it also legitimizes discrimination, undermines our common humanity, and prevents individuals, businesses, and economies from reaching their full potential. Indeed, this year marks 50 years since the British government decriminalised consensual sexual relations in England and Wales after centuries of persecution. And a more recent development was the passing of the Policing and Crime Act 2017, which enshrines in law pardons for those convicted of consensual same-sex relationships in the UK. And we want to see decriminalisation in every country that retains outdated and discriminatory laws. And of course, it's not just about penal codes, it's also about changing attitudes and norms that condone or promote discrimination and violence against LGBT people. Yet sadly, homosexuality remains a criminal offence in 73 countries. 73 countries. And some of these countries seek to excuse it by saying that the UK gave them these laws, or that in recommending decriminalisation, we are seeking to impose so-called Western values. But both these excuses are unacceptable. The second area of focus for us is building international consensus on LGBT rights. And it's important that we encourage change around the world. And champion LGBT rights locally or at the multinational level, especially in countries where they're under threat, is always very difficult work, requiring sensitivity, persistence, and patience. I think the UK government is performing this task very well, and it can be an excellent way to showcase our values and, if you want, the UK brand at its best. Last November, for example, the British Embassy in Bangkok hosted an event on tackling violence and discrimination to tie in with the International Lesbian and Gay Association conference. And Pride celebrations provide annual opportunities to rally to the cause. I said at the start that I was gay. On a more personal note, I can admit that being an out diplomat has drawn attention, indeed anger towards me that I never asked for and that I never wanted. Indeed, I've learned that as a gay person, you never come out once. You come out on multiple occasions, and I come out here every time an Italian asks me how my wife is enjoying Italy. I think since the lifting of the ban on homosexual diplomats in 1991, which came far too late, I would say, I'm pleased to say that the Foreign and Commonwealth Office has made strides to build a more inclusive workplace. We clearly will be a stronger and smarter organisation when we bring out individuality and authentic leadership in our staff. And that means not holding back part of an identity or sexuality or beliefs for fear of being excluded or judged. And I'm proud that the Foreign and Commonwealth Office was one of the first British government departments to establish an LGBT target for senior management staff. And that target, just to share with you, is 6%. Not a scientific figure, and there was a lot of debate about whether it would be 5%, 6%, 7%, and how to reflect that as part of the UK working population. But senior managers at the Foreign Office decided that what was key initially was really to provide a signal to the organisation. And I would add that one of the objectives of my organisation is to do away with targets of that type. Because we want to move on from the conversation about she is a woman ambassador. The key issue is that she is an ambassador who happens to be a woman, or that he is a gay consul general, where the issue is really that he is a consul general who happens to be gay. These are irrelevant characteristics. And so just in conclusion, I'll finish by saying that we in the Foreign and Commonwealth Office will continue to advocate for gender equality and LGBT rights across the world, working with civil society and with campaigners on the ground. And it's work that I'm very proud to be associated with. Yesterday at my consulate, we hosted an International Women's Day event, and I was very struck by one of the slogans of the campaign, which is "Defy Expectation." And so in ending, I would just encourage you all to defy expectation. Thank you.